Hello everybody, this is Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-minute histories videos. And this is part 2 of our 5-part series exploring places on and around Pennsylvania Avenue. And as with the first one and the rest, I'm going to be joined by Lady Brion Gill of the Black Arts and Entertainment District. But before I turn it over to Lady Brion, just want to say a quick thanks again to PNC and the Maryland Historical Trust for making this series possible. All right, we're going to talk today about the Druid Hill Avenue YMCA. That's the building behind me. But let's start a little earlier. Let's start with the start of YMCAs in general. They got their start way back about 150 years ago. A gentleman, 22 years old, named George Williams, had moved from a farm to London to work in a department store, and he was appalled by all of the evils that were taking place on the streets of London and what kind of craziness young men could get into if they weren't on their best behavior. And so with 11 friends in 1844, he formed the first YMCA. It was a pretty bold idea. Maybe the boldest part about it was that the organization purposefully transcended the very strict class lines that existed in England at the time. They promoted camaraderie and fellowship among people of all classes. Our first YMCA in America, we got our start just 7 years later in 1851 in Boston with a ship's captain turned missionary named Thomas Sullivan. In his words, he wanted to create a home away from home for sailors, and he did that in Boston. And then Y started popping up all over the place in the United States. At first, they were all white. The first black YMCA was in, Washington, D.C. in 1855, so 1853, pretty early. We got our first YMCA in Baltimore, a white YMCA in 1855. And then 30 years later, in 1885, some of Baltimore's black leaders decided to try to organize around forming a black Y, or what they called a colored YMCA here in Baltimore. Though this effort was really an outgrowth of earlier efforts around fighting racism and promoting black Baltimoreans. For example, in 1869, Bishop Alexander Wayman at Bethel AME organized people around fighting racism. In the 1870s, Reverend Harvey Johnson at Union Baptist Church formed the United Brotherhood of Liberty, one of the very earliest organized civil rights efforts. And then in the 1890s, a group called the Citywide Young People's Forum organized around providing recreational activities for the city's black youth. And the Y was an outgrowth of that. By 1893, the leadership had gotten organized enough to petition to form a Y, and in 1896 they were granted permission. So we got our Y in 1896. They had the organization, but they did not have a building. For the early years, they sort of bopped up and down Druid Hill Avenue in 4 different places, renting spaces from 4 places. But in 1918, they pulled their resources together and were able to build this building behind me. Not surprisingly, membership jumped. It skyrocketed from 172 to 812. One of the big attractions was a swimming pool in here. Black youth were prohibited to swim in the white-only public pools. And so a number of young black men, this was a YMCA, learned to swim here, including 2 names who I know you'll be familiar with, Thurgood Marshall and Calloway. Got their swimming starts here as well. Servicemen stayed in some of the 62 dorm rooms that the building had. And in every edition of the Green Book, that travel guide for black travelers from the 1930s to the 1960s, the Druid Hill Avenue YMCA was featured there. In 1967, YMCAs nationally desegregated. We got our start a little bit earlier. 1960, the Baltimore area Ys desegregated, and this YMCA became part of that network. In 2010, there was a massive restoration project. The building is now state-of-the-art with health and wellness centers and a pool where the youth today are still learning to swim. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Lady Brion Gill to talk a little bit about what's going on today with youth and the community here. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Johns. So my name is Lady Brion, and I am the Executive Director at the Black Arts District. Today, Johns has been talking about the YMCA, and so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the ways in which the Black Arts District supports youth programming in the city. So one of the things that we are doing is when we do our programs, specifically some of our flagship programs include the Black Artist Fair, which is an intergenerational educational experience, particularly for Black creatives. We make sure that we have targeted events that really focus on young creatives in the city. So for example, we have panels where we partner with Do More Baltimore, a youth-centered poetry organization in the city, to talk about artivism and the ways they use poetry in alignment with their activism to really create civic engagement opportunities in community. We also partner with organizations like Youth as Resources to make sure that not only do young people have opportunities to get resources for what they're working on, but young creatives have opportunities to build on their creative career and their creative ideas. Ultimately, at the Black Arts District, we represent a wide range of Black creatives that definitely includes our young people. And so we're thinking about new ways to have programming specifically for young people, like when we do public installations in community or mural projects in the community. How can we use apprenticeship as a model where elder muralists or visual artists can work with young visual artists to be able to produce community projects? We also have our historical photography project, which is going to be developing a curriculum specifically for high school students to engage in the photo installations, oral narratives, and archive that we are producing specifically about Pennsylvania Avenue and the history in West Baltimore. So as we develop, we are continuing to think about new ways to engage with our schools and our youth community in Baltimore, and we would love to connect with you for new ideas or partnership opportunities. So please reach out to us. Our website is blackartsdistrict.org, or we're official Black Arts District on Instagram. We'd love to talk to you soon. Thank you.